this is part one, talking about how I was disillusioned from my childhood religion as well as my family. It gets pretty dark, so keep that in mind. If you're not in a good space mentally, maybe this isn't the best video for you to be watching. But I will begin now. So, between the ages of 5 and 8 years old, my mother began using me as a chaperone to my older sister. My sister was 18 at the time. We'll just call her B for simplicity's sake, because there ends up being several characters in this, just to make it less confusing. So I was sent to report back in case they did anything they weren't supposed to be doing. You know, that was my little job as a baby, essentially. And it was very scary. I didn't like it at all. I remember they would like start making out and stuff, and then they would get really mad and like yell at me not to tell my parents. And they would like bully me and make me feel really uncomfortable a lot, and we would go on dates that just weren't fun or appropriate for a kid my age to be going on. I was just really scared and uncomfortable the entire time. And I would like ask my mom if I could stop having to go, because there were other people, there were other options, like, and she would just ignore me and make me go anyways. And looking back, it sort of makes sense, because not too long previous, she had just had a miscarriage, and she's told me over the years that she thinks that happened because of me, because I got lost at a Bible convention for all of 15 minutes. It was a very small event. I was surrounded with people that knew me and knew my family. I was never really in danger. But she says that me getting lost that time was resulted in her miscarrying. So that's probably why she didn't protect me. But I remember very little from these dates. I spent a lot of time very scared, very anxious. I would get sick a lot. My little sister came around in 2002, and I remember B would give her baths and then take her into her bedroom, B's bedroom, and just take like 1,000 pictures of her undressed, like barely covered by a towel. So that was weird. And the three of us were left alone together a lot. Again, very little in the way of memories until later on, as I'll explain. But I had one friend come over, and she told me that I would tell her, do not go in B's room because really bad stuff will happen if you go in there. And I was terrified. And she was like, well, what happens in there? And I wouldn't say anything. I was too scared to say anything. But eventually my mom made a rule that we weren't allowed to like spend all our time upstairs anymore. We weren't allowed to have our toys up there. We weren't allowed to just be up there all the time. And I didn't really understand why. It seemed like it was kind of coming out of left field. But all of our toys and things were moved to a screened-in porch downstairs, and that's where we were meant to play from here on out. And mind you, we're living up in Pennsylvania, where there's about 3 months of warm weather, and the rest of the year it's like really cold, really miserable. So it wasn't a great place for us to be expected to play, but we made it work. We still had fun. We still had a lot of memories down there, but a memory that really stands out to me are the poppies. Like, poppies just lined that window out front, and I would just stare at it, and like the poppies made me feel a little safer. And I really didn't understand why, you know. But eventually my older sister did move out, and then I got her bedroom. Because previous to that, ever since my baby sister had been born, we'd been sharing our bedroom. And now I had my own room for the first time in a good while, a very long time. And it was fun. Like, I really liked having that space to all to myself and being able to make more art and have a little more privacy, and you know, it was great. But unfortunately, my sister moved back home, and that became our bedroom. And again, I don't have a lot of memories because I couldn't process what was happening. But I'm quite certain things were happening. But she found a boyfriend again. And again, at 12 years old, I had to be a chaperone. It was so scary, and I hated it. My sister would fly into these rages when there were scheduling conflicts, and I wasn't able to chaperone that time. And, you know, when I did chaperone them, like, her boyfriend would make sexual comments and stare at me and take a million pictures of me, comment on my body, like a lot of icky, uncomfortable stuff. Their marriage wasn't good, and they really tried to force me to be their mediator, and they really were pressuring me to move in with them. And they played this all off, being like, oh, well, mom and dad are bad, they don't understand you, they're not going to be there for you, da-da-da. And at that age, I didn't fully understand what they even meant. And I really understood that it was manipulation later on, because when I started having issues at home, it was crickets. They weren't supportive. They didn't care. That whole spiel they gave me was just so I would move in with them, so they didn't have to deal with each other as much, or whatever was going on. And it was just really uncomfortable. Like, they made me stay at their apartment, like, as often as possible. And they would fight constantly. They would constantly be getting into, like, near car accidents because they would be yelling at each other while driving, and driving really erratically in, like, all kinds of weather. Like, downpour, rain, driving erratically because they're yelling at each other. They would make sexual remarks at me about my body. Like, I was always, like, told to stand there for these pictures they would take of me and stuff. It was just really uncomfortable, and my escape started to be, like, writing and drawing. And me and my cousin would work on these stories together. I'm a cousin from my dad's side. And I just found a lot of comfort in that friendship and in creating art with that cousin. And eventually they got curious about what I was doing, and they're like, so what's your stories about? What are you writing? And I was really uncomfortable with sharing that with them. But eventually they wore me down, and I told them, like, oh, it's you know, I explained what the story was about. And they made fun of me. And they called it stupid, because they realized after harassing me and getting it out of me that they couldn't actually make money off of my ideas, or so they thought. And that really broke my heart, because they were making fun of the one thing that made me feel safe and made me feel seen and made me feel like I could express myself on some level, you know? So there was that. Alright, so part 2. So art really continued to be my only real avenue of, like, accessing my true self and was like my little pocket of safety. But I was dealing with more and more harassment from my family over the art that I was making. My mom always thought my art was demonic or weird or whatever, so I didn't share my art with her. It was very uncomfortable doing so. And at church or like the meetings, they'd state that nothing should take more of my time than studying the Bible, like point blank. And I started to feel a lot of guilt and shame over how much time I was spending making art. So I started more time studying the Bible and going house to house preaching the Bible to people. I became very passionate about it, and I got really close to the God of that religion. And eventually I decided to vow in prayer to devote my life to that God, and I was baptized. I started shunning people, and I would send letters and emails to family members begging them to repent, and just, I'm so embarrassed of that stuff. But I would study ad nauseum. I was not content with like surface knowledge about this stuff. I would dig and dig and dig and try to find the most accurate, deep understanding of the Bible and this religion I was in. I would devour like all the videos and articles and meetings and assemblies. Like, it was what I looked like. The assemblies were the thing I looked forward to the most out of every year. And I believed it was all undisputable truth, and that I was smarter than everyone else in the world. Like, I genuinely thought I had the truth, and there was no other truths to be had. Eventually, I got my first job, and I started pioneering. Now, pioneering, for those of you that didn't grow up as a witness, that is where you pledge to preach for 50 hours a month, which doesn't seem like a lot, but I had my first job at that time, and it's still a lot. Like, that's multiple hours a day, and you can't go out door-to-door canvassing every single day, so like, it was really crunching numbers and hours, and it was a lot to commit to as such a young person. And my mom started resenting me more and more the more I devoted myself to the family faith. And that really confused me, because I was born into this religion and expected to make it my entire life. So I was really confused as to why my mom was getting so angry at me over it. And like, we would fight a lot. It was really upsetting. But around that time, I started having these weird flashbacks at night where my bed would just shake really violently, and it was just me alone in my bed, fully awake. And I'd see these shadows moving around me and stuff. And I knew what sleep paralysis was. Like, my cousin that I was really close with, like, had it for a few times and explained to me what it was, and I knew it wasn't that. I was fully awake. This was like at nighttime, like a minute after I laid down to go to bed, and I would stay up all night because the shaking wouldn't stop. It would just go on and on and on all night. And I started having anxiety attacks on an extremely regular basis because of what was happening. Shortly after, it was around the time I graduated, B ran away from home because I wasn't coming over as much, because I had a job, I had a life now, like, I was pioneering. So I wasn't going to their house every weekend to be their little mediator, to be their little child, or to be their little sexual whatever the heck I was to them, you know. And she cheated on her husband. She ran away and cheated on her husband with, like, his family member. I can't remember if it was his brother or his cousin. And then she came back home with her tail between her legs and was like, well, I'm just a sex addict and I can't help it. And the elders in the congregation privately reproved her, which means, like, she got in a little bit of trouble. Like, she's not allowed to, like, pioneer, and she's not allowed to make comments at meetings. That was literally it. That was all the punishment she got over that. The elders just really didn't seem to care at all that she'd just done that, and her husband took her back. Around that same time, my cousins ran away from home because their father was molesting them, and he was arrested for being a pedophile. And I watched in horror as most of my family stayed on his side, my pedophile uncle's side, and ran my cousins out of the family. Never had anything nice to say about them. Said they were disgusting liars and and all this crap. One of these family members that really had a lot of shit to say and kept wishing death upon them was my Uncle Joel. This is someone I really admired previously. Like, I always loved his art. I really thought he was a swell dude. More on that later. But I decided to move to Florida because I had some really good friends down here, and I thought I would have more fun preaching if I joined an ASL congregation, and there's more of a heavy population of deaf people down here, and I thought I could really help out the community and make a difference, and it's just really what I wanted to do. Plus, I had, like, crippling depression during the winter time, and I thought my mental health would improve. And I was a lot happier there for a little bit. But, like, I hadn't even been down here for a few months, and my sister runs away from home and cheats on her husband again, and then comes to my house down in Florida bawling to me because she cheated again with her husband's coworker this time, and was keeping it a secret from the rest of the family. And, like, my brother-in-law came down, and they were both sat me down and were trying to make me be the mediator, make me make their decisions for them. And at that time, I was still pretty love and light, and I was like, oh, like, I fully supported them both. Ugh. Yeah, but she went back home to Pennsylvania, again, barely got a slap on the wrist, got reproved again. Her only punishment was not being allowed to pioneer, which who wants to pioneer in the first place? It's miserable. But we're still in 2019, so I ended up stumbling across my cousin's testimony about what my uncle had done. And I knew the story for the most part, but her testimony really helped me realize that the elders were protecting my uncle the entire time, and Joel had a lot to do with that. And not only that, Joel was pretty highly suspected of being responsible for my Uncle Nathan dying as a teenager. So there's that. I have a huge crisis of faith, you know. Hearing my cousin's story and Nathan's story really touched my heart. And, like, I couldn't shake it. I vigorously studied, looking for whys, looking for some explanation. I remember laying on my couch just praying out loud, sobbing my fucking heart out, asking why the one true God of the one true religion was allowing this to happen in his sacred place. Why? And to please bring Joel to justice, bring B to justice. sobbing my eyes out, like screaming to this God. And eventually I just suppressed it. Like, I doubled down. I re-brainwashed myself. I preached more than I ever had. I studied more than I ever had. I spent more time with fellow worshipers than I ever had. I volunteered at quick builds. Every free moment I had, I was devoting to that religion, to that faith. Like, reconvincing myself it was real. But, like, I couldn't spend every waking moment, re-brainwashing myself. Like, occasionally I was just standing at work bored, nothing to do, and I was alone with my thoughts, and I'd have anxiety attacks, and I'd cry. I'd be sobbing while stocking the shelves. Like, customers would come up behind me, and I would just fully be crying while I was interacting with them. Like, I was so broken. And, like, now that I knew, I officially knew that, like, there was a widespread thing being said about Jehovah's Witnesses, that they protect pedophiles. And I had a first-hand account showing me that. And I just kept trying to convince myself that what my cousin went through was just a one-off thing, that the elders and Joel did not have God's blessing, that congregation is probably just up in arms because they don't have God's Holy Spirit and da-da-da. Like, I really went through mental gymnastics trying to soothe myself over this situation. And, like, my friends helped me, like, kind of calm down a little bit. A little. But in 2019, me and, like, one of my best friends went to MegaCon. It was my first ever time getting to go, and I got to meet David Tennant. I was so excited. It was probably one of the most exciting experiences of my life, like, back then. And I really wanted to go again, so I invited B and my little sister to the Spring 2020 con. Spring 2020. And they went behind my back and invited my mom without my consent. But Mom wasn't gonna even go to the Comic-Con and literally just planned on sitting alone in my apartment for 3 days, doing who knows what. Like, I don't know why she even wanted to come along. But we fought about that a lot, and I asked that she didn't come this time. I asked that my mom didn't come this time because I didn't want her to feel excluded, and I proposed another, like, set of dates where she could come down instead. We would do activities that she would enjoy, like go to the beach and go for walks and enjoy nature, like, we weren't going to be doing all that. Like, it was a 4-day vacation, 3 of which of those days we were going to not be home. And my mother just took it very poorly. She was really upset with me and would, like, I would be at work, my phone blowing up over this, and in the end, it was COVID, so, like, the trip never even happened. But to this day, I know several people that my mother has told that this is the reason I don't talk to them anymore, because of the con. Which is just so far from the truth. It's irrelevant, like, it's barely relevant to the story. But I'll tell you what is relevant. Meanwhile, up in Pennsylvania, while I'm just down in Florida having my little panic attacks at work, my little sister had made a new friend. Like, they were both children, my little sister and her friend were both children, okay? And B starts taking an extreme liking to this new friend. So late 2020, I get my COVID shot, and I just decided to drive up to Pennsylvania and treat my little sister to a vacation with me. 2020 had been really hard on me, but I started going to therapy, and in a lot of ways I was doing a little better mentally. But we spent 2 weeks together at my apartment in Florida. We did a lot of fun stuff. There was like a Naruto themed noodle shop that we went to, and we got these crazy like TikTok trending drinks, and we like went down a lazy river together, and there's like little dragonflies landing on us. It was so cute. We're just drawing together, watching anime together, just laughing our asses off together. And it was just so nice. Like, I missed my little sister so much, and it just felt so good to bond with her. But like, I could tell something was really bothering her the whole time. And finally she told me that B was forcing her friend, this minor, to kiss her, and B was inappropriately touching this kid, and B was screaming at this kid when she acted like uncomfortable or tried to get B to back off a little bit, you know, like getting screamed at, and I was mortified, as you would be, like, and it was the last straw with B. Like, I never wanted to speak to her, see her, any of it. And I went with full no contact, no questions asked, period. But I didn't do anything about it for about a month. I was having anxiety attacks on a regular basis at work, crying at work, stocking the shelves. And finally I reached out to my best friend at the time, and I asked for advice. But I didn't name names, and I peppered in a few little, like, white lies to kind of throw her off, so she didn't know who I was talking about, you know? And her advice was pretty basic. She was like, read the Organized to Do God's Will book, cover to cover, and follow that to a T. And she, like, gave me a few chapters and paragraphs to particularly pay attention to. And so I did that. I got out my Bible, I got out the Organized to Do God's Will book. I had physical copies in my hands, read it, and figured out what I had to do. So I called my little sister and said, either you tell the elders what B did, or I will. And I was told that it was brought up to the elders. After, like, a slew of phone calls, crying at me, calling me the worst, saying I was ruining everything, I'm ruining all her fun times, this is the happiest she's ever been, and I just destroyed her life, you know. Yeah. It keeps deleting this part. Wonder why. But, oh my god. So that friend, the one that was like, oh yeah, look at the Organized to Do God's Will book, and do that. That friend somehow found out who I was talking about. Like, I didn't tell her, she just put her little detective hat on and figured it out some kind of way. And she eventually gets in touch with me and is like, hey, I know who you're talking about. I'm so sorry you went through that. All this, that, and the third, and was just like, hey, I need you to know that B lied. They did not go to the elders like they told you. They are pioneering, which, as I explained before, is not allowed. Like, if you get reproved, your ass isn't pioneering. That's the last thing you're about to be doing when you're reproved. So I knew either she had not gone to the elders at all, or she had lied to the elders. So now, according to the Organized to Do God's Will book that I read cover to cover multiple times, it was my turn to call the elders. So I went ahead and called a elder from my childhood congregation, my very first congregation that I was born into. Like, this man observed my mother being pregnant, and, like, I'd always known this man my entire life. I called him And I told him everything. I told him what B did to that girl. And he was like, okay, we're going to investigate this. He got in touch with my current elders at my current congregation, and they continued to meet up with me for a good while about the situation. I even met with the CO at the time, discussed the situation. And I'm not super privy to what happened back up in Pennsylvania, but I know that the police rolled up and that they had several meetings with elders. And B lied. And my little sister changed her story and lied. Which broke my heart because I really wanted her to let me be there for her and get her out of that situation. And she'd rather just lie about it. But the elders got back in touch with me and let me know that nothing was going to be done about it. Regardless to the fact that I provided a lot of evidence, a lot of receipts, a lot of proof to what I was saying. And they felt it was not worth investigating anymore because the stories were too different. So now, not only do I have one instance where a pedophile was being believed and protected over a victim, but I had 2 instances of that happening in my immediate family. I mean, and my mom took it even further and proceeded to tell my brother-in-law that they were going to be treating me as a disfellowshipped person from now on out. And I was devastated. I drove 15 hours to go cry in my best friend's arms. Devastated. My heart was so broken because here I was, a devout Christian, doing everything I believed I was supposed to be doing. Living my life in the way I thought my family and the God I was serving would want me to live. And yet here were these pedophiles in my family being treated better than I was and having their praises sung. And I was being shunned. Like, it really upset me. And my mom eventually tried to backpedal and say she was proud of me and all this shit, and she's sorry, but the damage was done. Like, she handled it so inappropriately. But my mom, my dad, and my little sister. Anyways, so now we're in 2021. My mom, dad, and little sister all moved to Florida after all that had gone down. And I did give them a second chance. Like, I thought maybe things would somehow be different. But, every time I hung out with them, all they had to say was that B was such a great and wonderful person, and I should just let bygones be bygones, and the whole family can be happy again. Which, I'm sorry, but I don't believe some things are forgivable, and I don't know, the whole thing just really left a bad taste in my mouth. And I just kind of ended up distancing myself from them after a while. But around that time, I did end up developing feelings for somebody. It was like a newer friend that I had made, and it was just a really good time. They acted like they liked me back, and they welcomed me into their friend group, and we had this little Discord server where we'd play games and share art with each other, and we would go on little outings together, and it just made me really, really, really happy, and I felt like love in my heart in a way I'd never felt love. And I started to feel like really, like my inner child started to feel safe because they were experiencing like a love they've always wanted. And they felt safe enough to start telling me information and help me start filling the gaps where the amnesia had left from my childhood. And this part isn't cute, but I started having really bad flashbacks, and a lot of nightmares. The bed was starting to shake again like it had all those years ago. And all of the dreams were and flashbacks were about B and that time period between when I was 5 and 8. And I won't go into full detail because they're really upsetting and I don't want to cry right now. But I will say that they're very sexual in nature and that I couldn't comprehend what was going on as a child because I had no sense of sexuality. I was a baby, I was a child. And all I could figure was that my body, like, I just felt like I had to go to the bathroom and I couldn't. And these dreams were taking place. These dreams and flashbacks were taking place in B's bedroom, in the living room, running up and down the stairs, and then like at that elder's house because he and his wife had gone out of town and they asked B to cat sit for them, and B took me and my little sister over there. So there was no chance of anyone seeing anything. But like that's the part of the story I've been really scared to share. It's like really hard to talk about because it makes me feel like there's something wrong with me to some degree. And it just makes me feel really guilty because I wish I could have protected my little sister. But I was so little myself and I didn't even know what was going on. It's just really, the whole thing just really upsets me, and it's hard to talk about, and that's a really damning thing to say out loud, is that someone you grew up loving and trusting and viewing as having your best interests in heart was actually doing things that are unspeakable to you. But that kind of wraps up like the part of my story that includes my family. And in the next part we're gonna get more into like other things that ended up disillusioning me and making me realize that my faith wasn't all I believed it was. Alright, so we're backtracking a tiny bit back to 2022 just because I've been focused on my family. So around that time, around COVID, my roommates started more openly living a double life. Like this may have been already going on and I just wasn't privy to it. But I stumbled across a social media page she had, which had her selfies and everything on it, and it was very blatantly hers. But on that account, she was talking about us dating, which wasn't true, like at all. And that really, like I, at that point, hadn't really come to terms with my sexuality or being pan or anything. So it was I was kind of threatened by it a little bit. I was like, why would you be saying that about me online? Like, I'm trying to build my life down here. I'm trying to be a good little witness. Like, and I kind of had a meltdown about it, and that's actually what triggered me starting therapy back in 2022. Not my family, shockingly. But I ended up calling her out on it. I was like, hey, why are you posting this stuff about me? Like, it's kind of makes me uncomfortable. And she lied. She said it wasn't her account when there was clear evidence it was. She said, like, she gave her friend that account and they took it over, and it's just, it did not make any sense. But, I mean, I gaslit myself into believing her because I couldn't really deal with it at that moment. Like, I'd built my entire life with her down here, and I just couldn't deal with it, so I just gaslit myself into believing her. But, like, our friendship had very definitely soured after that, because, like, she started avoiding me a lot. Like, I had just started a brand new job that it was teaching, and when I was in the religion, teaching was my dream job. And I was so excited. It was my first time having a job not in retail, like a job I actually loved and wanted. And it just felt like such a brand new, exciting opportunity for me. And I was just so happy and ready to settle into this new career. But, you know, you have to get up early to be a teacher. And she decided she was going to start staying up all night on Discord, like on the chat, like where you're talking out loud. And she would be on there from like 9 p.m. to 4 a.m. loudly laughing and talking, and then they were like playing games together. So like whenever she would almost get caught or whatever, she would scream like really loud. And I had to get up at like 5:30, 6 a.m. and she's doing all this. And like I tried to talk to her about it a few times, and she didn't respect me, and she continued to do that. And because I talked to her a few times about keeping the volume down a little bit on nights when I have to work the next morning, she got really upset with me and started avoiding me. And like we had our shows we were watching, and we would make a point to have like a meal together at least once a week, and she completely stopped doing that. And like every time I'd sit down and try to talk to her about it, she would just act like she had no idea what I was talking about and that there were no issues between us. And she'd be like, what? I'm fine. What do you mean? Huh? And like just kind of gaslight me a little bit. And it all came to a head when she just decided she was just gonna up and move out, and only gave me a few weeks notice. I was terrified because like I had a few tiny bit prospects lined up, but nothing that was gonna work out anytime soon. Like I had just gotten out of retail, and I had my first job that I really loved, and I didn't want to up and move out of town, you know, like, and I had an offer to move like 2.5 hours away, but like I just said, I wanted to stay with my brand new job. And this is kind of besides the point, and I'll talk more about it in a little bit, but I was starting to realize that I was non-binary and pansexual at the time, and this friend was really not into that. Like we would be talking about literally anything else, like totally unrelated subjects, and she would like somehow be like, you know what I hate? The homosexuals. And it was so fucking random. Like, I'm not even gonna lie. Like, it was almost like suspicious. But, yeah, I wasn't super feeling moving in with that friend at that moment. And plus, like, they weren't even really ready for me to move in, like, financially. And I wasn't really, like, if I'd moved out there, I wouldn't have had a job and I would have had to start all over again, probably in retail or fast food. And I'd finally gotten out of that. But, we're back to, like, 2021, but, end of 2021, but I hadn't really fully woken up, but I did know that the governing body wasn't all right all the time, because I'd heard these rumors that the witnesses protect pedophiles, and I did find that to be true, and I realized that they're not right about everything. And following that realization, the second thing I deconstructed was the organization's teachings on queerness, I just found a lot of stuff that was biblical, that didn't follow what they were, this bigotry, Joseph and the Coat of Many Colors is, like, huge, like, that is, like, my favorite, like, but I just landed in this weird limbo where I thought I could stay at JW, but still know that some of their teachings are false, and, I kind of wanted to stick it out for that one friend that I had a crush on, but one night, like, I went to that crush's Zoom meeting, because we're still in COVID, and the Bible highlights was in Leviticus, talking about the Mosaic Law. And, but yeah, that entire meeting was all about why the Mosaic Law no longer applies to, like, everything. Except the one scripture about cross-dressing. And then I sat there for 15 minutes and listened to some of the most transphobic stuff I've ever heard. And it was one thing to know, hey, the organization's wrong about certain things. It was another thing to sit through an entire meeting devoted to one of those wrong things that they're wrong about. Not to mention, I had a sibling who was trans. And it just really upset me that I was ever a part of spreading such hateful rhetoric, and I wanted nothing to do with it. And I think that was the last meeting, or if not one of the last meetings I ever attended. I still really cared about the Bible, like, I was still very interested in it, but I was not researching it outside of the confines of essentially the propaganda that I previously limited myself to researching the Bible through, because in the Jehovah's Witness faith, like, you have to exclusively get all your knowledge from their articles. Like, you're not allowed to research the Bible through biblical scholars or literally anything else. And I was researching the Bible outside of those confines, and like, I didn't have to go far to, like, start learning about, like, El and Yahweh and this entire pantheon of gods, including Asherah, who was Yahweh's wife, and, like, I read all the non-canon books of the Bible, and they were really interesting and stuff, but I don't know, I just ultimately got to the point where I realized that we will never know what the Bible originally said. And it's insane to force people to live their life in a specific way based on a book that we can't be dogmatic about what it ever said. You know? But, I mean, I still had doubts that I was wrong about my faith up until, like, a really bad week at the very end of 2021. No. Yeah, 2021, at the very end. I had a week where I was very suicidal. Like, my roommate had been gone. I had no idea where I was gonna live. Every witness I reached out to for help had some sob story about whatever they were going through, or they just completely denied me any help. And I was really scared, and I had no idea where to go, or if I was gonna be homeless, or like where I was gonna leave my cats, where they were gonna be taken care of and I could have them back once I got back on my feet. Like, I was terrified. It was very suicidal. And a coworker ended up taking me under her wing and becoming like a mother to me. She was like one of the best things that ever happened to me, period. And around that same time, I discovered the BITE model, BITE. I read it. I read the full description of it, and my heart absolutely broke in that moment, because I realized I was living a lie, and I had been a part of a cult my entire life. And after that, I did the forbidden research. I Googled Jehovah's Witnesses. Yeah. That's my story. It's been really hard to fucking choke that out.